Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Edan Maban of LightCycleAstrology.com. Welcome back to the channel, friends. Today we are taking a look at the Mercury Cazimi that is happening today and tomorrow in the sign of Taurus. And that is when Mercury and the Sun move on to the same degree as one another in a particular sign. And of course, we've been in a Mercury retrograde cycle. So this is the halfway point of the Mercury retrograde. So we're going to take a look at what do Cazimis mean, especially as it is happening this time in Venus's sign of Taurus. And then we're going to take a look at the second half of Mercury's retrograde cycle, finishing up in the sign of Taurus here, as it connects to various planets and what happens alongside of the wrapping up of this cycle. Now, of course, before we get into today's content, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the notifications, leave me some comments in the comment section. It's always really nice to see how you guys are experiencing the astrology. You can always go to lightcycleastrology.com if you're interested in booking a reading with me, or you just want to pass me a private message. All right, let's go ahead and pull up the real-time clock now and take a look at Mercury in Cazimi. So this begins by 11:17 a.m. May 1st. So happy May's Day, everybody. Is it May's Day or May Day? Whatever it is, happy May Day, May 1st. We are having this pretty fortuitous transit by Mercury and the Sun on this May's Day. So you'll see here that Mercury is at 11 degrees and 32 minutes going retrograde, and the Sun is at 10 degrees and 59 minutes. So watch this. I wanted to show this to you. Actually, let me pull up my annotation so I can draw a circle around this and make it more visible. Now, I don't have all of the planets in here because I just wanted to keep the planets that were relevant to this particular video here. But watch this as I move the clock forward just by 1 minute. You'll see the Sun click on to 11 degrees and 00 minutes of Taurus. So first of all, Cazimi is this moment that lasts for about 20 hours or so this time. Sometimes it moves in and out of the same degree, but it's the moment at which Mercury, essentially being retrograde, is moving back towards Aries, during the retrograde motion that it is doing as it's going through this cycle. But of course, the Sun is moving towards Gemini counterclockwise. So we have Mercury going clockwise around the chart at this particular moment in retrograde, and we have the Sun moving clockwise. So they're both kind of sort of heading together, like towards a head-on collision, as it were. And they meet up exactly at 11:18 a.m. Today, and they move on to the same degree, this 11th degree. And now I have heard it talked about, I think it was by Demetra George, that the way you could think of things being timed, why was it important for things to be in the same degree? And there's sort of this concept or notion that a degree is like a step in a staircase. So you're either on that degree or you're not on that degree. So things are either perfect or perfected, and they're making that exact alignment between steps on a staircase, as it were. And in this particular situation, we want to see that how long is it that Mercury and the Sun are on that same step in the staircase together. So this lasts for about 20 and a half hours. And there is an exact moment here where Mercury passes over the Sun and moves to the other side of the Sun here. And this happens right around 7:28 by tonight. So right around 7, we'll go forward by minutes here. And you'll see here's 7:27 p.m. And look, here comes Mercury. There it goes, passing over. And I'll draw my circle again so you guys can see this. But if I go back just a minute, you'll see Mercury in the chart is, on the top side of the Sun. And then if I go one more minute ahead, we see that Mercury has moved over to the other side of the Sun. So this technically is the exact moment that Mercury is said to be reborn. Okay. And then what happens is, as we roll the clock forward until about 7:43 a.m. tomorrow morning on Tuesday now, we see that Mercury eventually moves back into the 10th degree of Taurus and moves off of that 11th degree step. So that is when the Mercury Cazimi is over. So let's talk about, first of all, what is Cazimi? What is happening when Mercury is basically essentially having his retrograde period broken up into two halves is really what this is. Well, Cazimi is thought of, first of all, as sort of taking on the light, or the life, right? The sun as a planet that is very much connected to the potential for life to exist at all. It's the light that brings life back to Mercury. And this is really symbolic because Mercury has this very close orbit to the sun. So one thing that was noticed in the ancient world is that because Mercury is that first orbit in the solar system, it spends a lot of time sort of being very near the sun. And because of that, it goes in and out of visibility quite rapidly. I think you really get that from the mythology of Mercury being the god called the psychopomp, right? Where he enters in and out of the underworld at will. He was said to be able to be the only god that could go down into the realm of Hades and then return out of Hades again. So that is your clue here that we're talking about something astronomical. We're talking about an astronomical observation that Mercury tended to go in and out of visibility and always was somewhat close to the sun. But metaphorically speaking, what you could imagine is that Mercury, let me just go back here by, I guess, a couple of days here, just to give you Mercury. As Mercury travels, actually, let's go back a bunch of days here. So watch, I'll put the circle back on. Watch Mercury as I go forward now. Mercury is heading closer and closer towards the sun until they meet up, right? Well, that first half of Mercury's retrograde cycle is all about this metaphor of Mercury descending into the underworld. And so astrologically or symbolically, you could think of this as a kind of symbolic death for Mercury. The underworld was the place where things went after they died, right? So Mercury is getting close to the sun. The sun was said to combust any planet that got that close to it. So it's sort of like things, and I wonder if this is even why we think of hell as kind of like a fiery, hot place. I don't know. There's all kinds of symbolism here that you could play with, but we know that lava comes from the underworld. But there's a sense here too, where when planets get close to the sun, it's like they're burning up. I wonder if that's where we get some of this ancient mythological connection to Hades having sort of a fiery, hell-like atmosphere. But that's just speculation on my part. But be that as it may, or whatever it is, Mercury or any planet getting this close to the sun, there's a metaphorical or symbolic journey into the realm of Hades, and represents the dying out of that planet. Now, in this case, Mercury will jump to the other side and begin the second half of the retrograde and begin separating away from the sun if we go forward by a couple of days here. And this is going to be the metaphorical period in the second half of the retrograde where, of course, Mercury is reborn. So he is, in the first half, he is traveling down into the underworld. He is the god of descent. He brings chaos and disorder. He questions things, right? And so he takes things apart. He is the ruler of the sign of Gemini and Virgo, two signs that are months preceding when the solar power is, in both cases, on its way towards descent, right? In Cancer, the sun's arc is at its zenith at the end of Mercury's sign of Gemini. But after the crossover into Cancer, the sun's arc begins to descend. And now we see darkness entering back into the light half of the year. As the end of Virgo is reached by the sun and the sun crosses over into Libra, right? We have the fall, descent. So Mercury is a god that is connected with things that go into the depths of Hades and the underworld, the realm of the dead, where things were mysteriously always regenerated, right? The underworld, of course, was the place that was observed to be, below the earth, and the earth was the place where things fell off of trees and decomposed, or we put bodies into the ground and they decompose. But, you could also take a seed and plant it in the earth, and it has this regenerative, fertile quality that brings life back. So this is the metaphoric symbolism of the Mercury retrograde cycle, of course, where that first half is Mercury descending. So what does this mean in our lives? It often means that this is the time at which there is a twist or turn of fate or fortune that might cause things to, through no action or fault of our own, move towards chaos or something being broken apart. So in the case of a job, this might be a period where you are really having a hard time at work, and you're sort of being led towards a place of really questioning whether that's the right place for you to keep working every day, something like that, for example. In a relationship, of course, we have Mercury traveling through Venus's sign this time, and it's retrograde. So there could be a lot of questions with how we relate to others, or in relationship. It doesn't have to be love relationships, but any kind of relationship, any kind of, bond or love on any level, friendship, familial, romantic, whatever kind of bonds or love that is shared between people. This could be a moment where something or another is being questioned about those bonds, traveling through Taurus. Now, Taurus is also a sign that deals with the fertility, the sexuality of springtime. So these are the themes that are running through this particular Mercury retrograde cycle. But whatever it is, Mercury descending in that first half of the retrograde, that is going to pull in the more chaotic parts of where things are taken apart or questioned, right? Now, what happens at the Mercury Cazimi is that this tends to be a moment where we come to almost like an epiphany, where things are rendered or become clarified or clear. And this is the moment, of course, when the sun refertilizes Mercury, and is the moment where Mercury is almost like Christ being reborn, right? Or heading towards resurrection, as it were. And this, of course, is because astronomically, Mercury is, from this point forward here, if we go forward by days, Mercury is separating out. So Mercury will at some point resolve the Mercury retrograde by moving out of the underworld. So the second half of the phase here that we are entering in after tomorrow by, tomorrow morning or so, Mercury moves off of that Cazimi step. So that period, that 20-hour period, first of all, is where we get the clarity that comes through. So that's what you want to watch for. You want to watch for the clarity to sort of be happening around that time. Those are the aha moments that you sort of go, okay, I feel confident and clear about what I have been through and what I should do now, or what I should say now, or maybe what kind of thought process I should apply to move things forward. That's really what is happening over the next 20 hours. And then as Mercury moves to separate away from the sun, this is Mercury's recovery, right? He eventually moves back into visibility. This happens by May the 12th. Mercury moves back into visibility. And then by May 14th, we have Mercury moving to turn direct again. So the second half of the Mercury retrograde cycle is going to be about hearing back from people, receiving messages that you've been waiting on, having your car finally fixed, and it's like the mechanic finally calls you and you've been waiting for, a while to get your car back, or the part comes in for your car, or something like this. You've received, like in my case, we received the building permits back from the building department right around this time. So you get the sense that things are sort of teetering towards the other direction now. Instead of things being chaotic and sort of falling apart, becoming intensified in sort of a crucible kind of way, this is the moment at which things tend towards recovery. And as Mercury moves away from the sun here, there was a couple of things that I wanted to show you moving forward. On May the 5th, we have that lunar eclipse happen in the sign of Scorpio. This is really important, and we are definitely going to be making content and talking about this this week, because this is a really important signature of the week, is this eclipse in the sign of Scorpio. But this eclipse is also in opposition to Mercury's retrograde traveling back in the sign of Taurus, right? So that is all part of it. So the eclipse is going to be just after Cazimi. I think that's really interesting. So you get sort of the aha moment. And then the moon in Scorpio going through an eclipse represents some kind of door that is shut or open, a door that sort of closes and then another door that maybe opens or something like that happens. And it's like a wild card that comes through. It's a wild card of fortune, I would call it. And this is all going to be part of Mercury rebuilding his sense of what to think and what to say and where to go from here. But as we get closer on, if we go a few more days forward here, we get a very interesting thing by May the 7th. Venus enters Cancer. So one thing that's kind of a detail, you may or may not notice this, but one thing that does happen is Venus enters a new sign. And during this whole Mercury retrograde, we've had mutual reception between Mercury and Venus. So if I put a Venus back into Gemini here, mutual reception when two planets are in each other's signs. Venus is in Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, right? And Mercury is in Taurus, which is ruled by Venus. So they have this interesting out of sight kind of reception. They don't see each other. Taurus as a sign cannot see its neighbor sign of Gemini and vice versa for Gemini. But it's almost like they have a psychic connection. So this has really been helping out this whole Mercury retrograde, is that there's been this sort of psychic receptivity that Mercury and Venus have. It's as if they sort of like, I think of it sometimes as like a mother and a child kind of a bond, where like if something happens to a child, right, and even if they're not together, it's like that mother's, you hear those stories of mothers saying, I knew I had to make a phone call. There is that sort of connection that Mercury and Venus have had during this Mercury retrograde. So that has really helped out. If Venus would have been in a sign where it had no reception back to Taurus during this retrograde, things would have been a lot more difficult for mercurial things during this retrograde. Things would have fallen apart a lot more. And you would have seen communications suffering more, technology suffering more. Your computers were likely to break down more or something like that, right? Things are fritzing out a lot more. And I think the mitigation has been that Venus has been in this sign where they're sharing mutual reception. But that changes by the 7th here, right around 10:30 a.m. Venus moves into Cancer, and now they still have reception. So there is even better reception by Venus to Mercury. They are going to share whole sign sextile reception to each other. So that is really, really good and positive. By the 12th, this is the really crucial moment in the second half of the cycle here. By May the 12th, two things happen. One of them is that Mercury emerges again into visibility. And I talk about this a lot on my channel, but this is when you could actually go out just before sunrise. Mercury is emerging as the morning star. So Mercury has gained enough separation from the sun that Mercury has a chance to rise before the sun in the morning. And if it's clear out there, you'll see Mercury's light shining through. So there's enough separation between the light of the sun and Mercury's reflected light that you can see Mercury as a star again on May the 12th. And this is really important. So this signifies that mercurial things are now essentially working and more effective. It's not, so for instance, if Mercury is invisible, it's like you might say something to somebody and it just goes right over their head. It's like the communications aren't heard or visible. They somehow have a way of just not really being very effective. But when Mercury moves into visibility, that is a sign that it's like you say something and they really receive it, But at the same time, look at this. This is really, really fascinating. At the same time that Mercury becomes visible, you also see that Mercury is at 6 degrees of Taurus and Venus is at 5 degrees, almost 6 degrees. So not only do they share a whole sign sextile aspect between one another, but now they're in a degree-based sextile aspect that is perfecting the same day that Mercury becomes visible. So I like this. I think that this is an incredibly powerful omen for that full moon onwards towards this day. So basically from May the 5th towards the 12th, about a week there, it's as if what the story is something like that full moon. There was something powerful that came through. Maybe a situation in the family or home that was difficult or challenging, a situation with a loved one, a friend, or a family member, or it could even be like an injury or an accident or sickness or something like that. But something like in a fortunate way became depressed, and it's like there was something overly emotional, difficult, challenging, potentially harmful that was really happening. Of course, an eclipse in Mars's sign could be about separations or loss or even actual literal death. It usually isn't about something literally dying, but it could be. It's usually a metaphorical death, but something metaphorically dies or becomes severed or is separated out or becomes surgically removed. Those are the symbolism that is happening around this eclipse. And you get the sense that this is the recovery from that. Mercury becomes visible. There's this degree-based sextile with Venus, a planet that wants to negotiate. It wants to bring peace. It wants to bring people together for the sake of love, right? It wants to find common ground and be considerate and be charming and loving. Especially in the sign of Cancer, Venus really wants to be nurturing. So I look at this as if there is almost something that is difficult or challenging around this eclipse coming up. This week ahead, we'll see the reconciliation or repair of that, especially in the family or home, because Venus moves into a sign that Mars has fallen in. So I get the sense that something will be able to be brought back into peace or resolution or reconciliation or brought back towards things or reasons that we love each other. So that is what I would how I would read that particular aspect that forms by May the 12th after this eclipse. So I think that is really positive and it's good. So in other words, if something is difficult or challenging, it might be that there is only a short time where we have to be stressed out about that. And there could be the potential for things to be repaired after that. Last couple of things I wanted to mention is that by May 14th, Mercury turns direct, and then by May 16th, Jupiter enters Taurus. So let me get rid of this arrow here. May 14th, here we go forward, and Mercury is stationing to turn direct. So Mercury retrograde is over by that point, and now Mercury moves forward. So this is really the moment at which, over the next couple of days, Mercury puts, he puts the rubber, the rubber to the road, or puts the pedal to the metal. This is the point at which the corner is turned. Mercury is banking around the corner. We're going to do something, come up with ideas that are going to bring things towards a resolution or recovery. It's the actionable point at which Mercury is moving forward again, right? And then we go forward a couple more days by basically the 16th, which is on Tuesday of the week following. We have Jupiter entering Taurus here. And look, the new moon is coming through. There's this big stellium in the sign of Taurus. So you get the sense that things are really wrapping up and coming to a completion, and that something is, it's like that saying, it's water under the bridge by this point. Things are moving on by this point. Now, I did want to share with you a couple more thoughts that I had written down. So now that we have sort of the timing and a little bit of the meaning behind some of these things that are going on in the second half of Mercury retrograde here, I wanted to give you something that I wrote down just so I made this clear about what I think that the meaning could be about for this particular Mercury retrograde in the second half here. So by the time that the Cazimi is over, now Mercury rises as the morning star, taking on masculine or yang temperament. Yeah, this yang temperament. One way that we see Mercury retrograde being split between the first part before the Cazimi and the second part after the Cazimi is that as Mercury is an evening star before the Cazimi and a morning star after the Cazimi, these are symbolisms that broadly relate to masculine or feminine qualities, right? So before the Cazimi, we have a a nighttime Venus, which is connected to the feminine or yin kind of temperament. And then, of course, after Mercury is reborn, we have a masculine or yang kind of temperament that we see Mercury expressing as being a morning star where he is out in the day. So we get these broad ways of interpreting Mercury depending on which side of the sun he is on. So, and when you say feminine or masculine, it doesn't have to be gender specific. We're giving an essence. It could be yang or yin kind of ways in which you look at that. It could be internal versus external, introverted versus extroverted. Those types of things are what we're getting at. We're saying that something is nighttime and then it shifts into daytime. So essentially Mercury is shifting into that daytime, more active kind of Mercury. And as he does so, he is a lot more likely to speak his mind without reservation, is more concerned with lines of logic and things rather than people. Although this is somewhat mitigated because this is still Mercury filtering his symbolism through a Venus-ruled sign. So there isn't going to be a total disconnection of Mercury to that more feminine quality because he's running through a feminine sign here. But there is a slight shift towards Mercury being more concerned with how to fix things. This is the classic scenario. I get this a lot when, with my partner, if something comes up and there's tension or stress, a lot of times Kate will say, stop trying to fix it. I don't need the solutions, because I'm always just like, well, okay, let's do this. Let's try that. And that is the sort of the line of logic, right? That tends to be a more masculine trait. It doesn't have to be. I mean, women can have that trait too, but this line of logic or fix it mentality, that's what Mercury is entering into at this time. He's sort of going towards more of the mechanical side of his expression, lines of logic, thinking about how to fix something or use tools rather than so much about how people relate to one another. That is something that Mercury is shifting a little bit in as he becomes the morning star. So that classic example of where the yin might just want to relate and the masculine wants to do. That's a shift here that we see. Mercury will also be more worldly ambitious and perhaps be more connected or concerned with how to use his skill to gain material goals. We could see conversations trying to advance the agenda of partnership for material reasons rather than sentimentality. I think that's really interesting. Mercury asks the questions of, is our relationship practical or logical? Are we headed towards a future that makes sense on paper, the right kind of job, the right place that we live, the right compatibility in finances? Does my partner have debt that I'll have to take on if we become engaged or something like that? This is that more practical side of Mercury that is really thinking about how life is connected on paper as it relates to relationship. Mercury has gone into a Venusian underworld to reconnect with how to listen to his senses. I love this Mercury in Taurus signature of Mercury being the mental quality, but filtering mental qualities through the sign that is very much connected with the moon and with Venus, both planets that have to do with the senses and feelings. Right? Mercury typically isn't like a feeling kind of planet, but as he travels through Venus's temple where the moon is exalted, he has been learning to listen to his bodily senses, right? How he feels, the sensations that he gets when he's touched, or what that inspires mentally, right? The kind of music, the kind of art, the kind of aesthetic beauty around us. These are the expressions of Mercury in the sign of Taurus. That there's a real deep connection to the senses. So now Mercury puts these instincts, right? He's gone down into the underworld of the senses. Now he's learning to put this connection of instinct. He's learning how to apply this towards his thoughts. And again, trying to take action on that. When Mercury gains visibility, Mercury things become more effective. Mercury appearing as an omen exactly when Venus makes a degree-based sextile. Venus is testifying her witnessing. So we're saying that as the 12th comes around, Mercury becomes more visible. There's a testimony that Venus is saying specifically, and it is about something Venusian. So the testimony is of speech reaching for harmony, reaching for diplomacy, grace, tact, pleasantness. It is filled with sensations, thoughts of sex, desire, lust, music, saying words of love, peace, flirtation, poetry, and beauty, right? So this is ways that Mercury will express, but he'll just be a little bit more ambitious about it, or you could say like exuberant about it, especially as Jupiter moves into the sign a few days later. If the eclipse prior to the appearance of Mercury coincides with anything that went badly, this may be the moment of make-up sex, reconciliation, reaffirming love, which we sort of talked about already. Or it could be the wild Uranian and erotic Jupiter co-presence, representing us seeking to have adventures in love, fun, meeting exciting new people, and drinking way too much. Yeah, so this is one way we could see a flip side of this. You get the scenario where, of course, this is all happening co-present with Uranus and Taurus, and then Jupiter moves into Taurus. So could this be the moment where there is a splitter break with something, and then there's this excitement to do something new, do something wild. Jupiter comes in and it's like you want to do it towards excess, and it's all about having fun. It's all about meeting new people and being sociable. And you get that sense here that there is this sort of wild exuberance that is about to really, really make things fun, exciting, new, something like that. So there could be two ways of this. I could see this being a story of hurt and disappointment, or something that goes badly that then becomes reconciled or fixed later on. Or it could be where something is changed or shifted, goes badly. There's a separation or a break, a surgery that is removing something, and then there is this excitement towards something new that is pleasure seeking and fun and sociable, and more just saying what's on your mind, doing what you want to do, putting ideas, like not being worried about how things come across so much, doing what you want to do and using skill to do it. That is how I see Mercury sort of moving through this last period of Mercury retrograde, leaving retrograde, and then moving forward again. So that's what I have for today. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. I hope you got something useful out of this. We're going to be back again later in the week, definitely to talk about the eclipse that is happening in Scorpio. So I would look forward to that. That's going to be a big one. So thanks so much, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.